how did it happen that two brothers who went into service a year apart ended up at the same place, assigned to the same crew? I mean, that Frank went and you went in.
I went in 1943, and he went in 1944. And I mean, there were 20 million people fighting, and we ended up at the same place at the same time. And we were different jobs and everything. So that was stunning. I mean, I don't know if that could happen again. I don't know what the odds are. Really.
Particularly since we were so close all our lives.
I can get rid of.
And whatever Frank was my older brother, whatever my older brother, I always tagged along with my older brother, and whatever he did, I did. So he joined the Air Force, you know, and when I was in high school, I turned 18 years old in 1943, and I was afraid I was going to get drafted, so I thought I better join the Air Force with Frank, you know. So I went in and signed up for the Air Force, assuming that they'd be big enough to let me graduate from high school, but they decided against that. They called me in on February 3rd of 1944, and by October, I was in England flying, starting to fly missions, or at least training missions at that time. So our story, we were both sent to the same place for overseas assignment. He went through what? He went through pilot training.
Yeah, I'll do that, my part now. I did almost the same thing. I was drafted while I was in high school. I had 4 months. This is 1943. I mean, that was a time we were still losing the war, and they needed people bad. So I got a draft notice while I was in high school, and I managed to get a deferment till June 1943. And I went in what they call a cadet program. That's to be a lieutenant in the Army. So I went to a lot of schools. I went to the University of Vermont for navigation. Then I went to Colorado for the armament. And then I got in charge of the armament. And then we went to Texas for practice. We used to have guys shoot at, when you're shooting a gun and you're moving and the target is moving, it's entirely different thing. So what they did was put us on the back of a truck on a circle round, and then they had like skeet things coming out. You never know which direction. So you're shooting, so you have to adjust. So it's kind of tricky. It takes a while to learn that. So that's was one of them. But then I went, like I say, we went. I started to. We took trains everywhere, and the odd thing about that is, no matter where you went, you never knew where you were going. And I used to look out the window and say, "Now, where the heck? What state are we in? What?" It was just weirdest thing. You did what you're told. Nobody told you why, where, or what. So that was so. Like I say, so I went through all these, and I was going to the last school for bombardier. In 3 months, I would have been a lieutenant in the air, a bombardier. But somehow I was going from Vermont to Colorado to Albuquerque to do this school, and we got to Kansas, and they stopped the train and turned it around. and somebody decided they weren't going to have bombardiers anymore. They were only going to have one guy on a lead plane, and then we'd all drop at the same time. So I got caught in that. So then I got back to assignment. So by that time, he was ready to go. So I had a lot of, I had almost a year military.
What?
But before he did.
Did you guys communicate? Did you sort of know where each other were?
Did we communicate where we were?
Yeah.
We wrote back and forth somewhat, but not much. You know how young people are. They don't.
Well, see,
don't
you
write.
could. That was another thing. You couldn't write. Everything that you wrote was censored. So I had a sub officer went through, and they had what they call V-mails. They were plastic that you could put a whole letter on a plastic like this. So you didn't
Well,
send
anyway,
a letter.
we ended up together at New York, a center for going overseas, and to our surprise, we ended up on the same crew, and they asked us if we wanted to be on the same crew, if that was okay with us, and we decided that it would be better if we weren't in the same crew, that we take our chances alone. So I was transferred off of his crew onto another crew, where I became the nose gunner. And we got to England at Horsham St. Faith in October, and we flew some training missions. And then on December 11th was my first mission over Germany. We flew to Hanau, and we bombed the railroad yards right outside of Frankfurt. I think your first mission was a little later, in December. And then that was during the Battle of the Bulge, if you remember, where the Germans made a big incentive to push the Americans back, and then it was a bad winter, and there was very bad weather, and so the Germans took advantage of the bad weather and the fact that from about the 11th of December until Christmas, we couldn't fly because it was just, the weather was too bad. The whole Europe was socked in, and that's when the Germans made all their push in the Battle of the Bulge. And so on December 24th, we started to fly again, and we both were scheduled to fly, but something was wrong with our plane, and we got halfway across the channel and had to come back. But Frank flew that mission, and then I flew the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd of January every day, those 3 days. And Frank was flying missions in between. And then on January 17th was my next mission. And if I remember correctly, Frank was not at the base. He had gone on a mission the day before, and lots of times when the fields are socked over, they land in other areas of England or on the French coast.
We landed in Scotland. Yeah.
In Scotland. And so he had done that the day before. He had landed in Scotland. So when I took off for a mission the next day, he wasn't at the base. And then we flew that mission to Harburg, which is right outside. It was an oil refinery. It was a time when Germany was running low on oil. The Palestri oil raids destroyed that. And so we were going after oil refineries so that they couldn't fly their airplanes, you know. And so we bombed that, and it was, we were over the target about noon, and the flak was very, very heavy, and all of a sudden the plane lurched, and we knew we were hit pretty bad, and we knocked out all our communications and our power to the turrets and things, and we had to feather 2 engines. 2 of the 4 engines were out, and gasoline was pouring from the gas lines into the airplane.
How did you feel at the time?
How did I feel? Scared. I felt, well, you know, when you're a young person, you don't think anything's going to happen to you. I thought, well, we've got a lot of trouble, but you know, we'll get through this, and that's all. You always have a very optimistic attitude when you're young, because you don't think you can die, you know. And so I was in the nose turret. I should say that, just backing up just a little bit, we went on the bomb run, and as I said, the flak was fierce. I mean, it was like, they talk about how you can get out and walk on the flak. That's the way it was. It was just solid. Every time an anti-aircraft shell bursts, all this flak is spread out, you know. And we're flying, I'm in the nose turret, we're flying directly into this flak. And you can tell how the gunners are locating you. A bomb shell, you know, a burst down here, a burst over here, a burst over here, and all of a sudden is a burst right out in front of you. So I'm sitting in the turret and I'm saying, hey, can't you turn right, left? Can't you do something? You know, don't fly into that stuff, you know. But it gets so thick that the smoke is just coming across your turret, you know, and you just got to keep going. And then it was my job. Late in the war, they eliminated bombardiers on planes and had only one bombardier in the lead plane, and the other planes dropped their bombs on the lead plane. So in my turret, I had a toggle switch to drop the bombs. So when, not only was I, you ask how I felt, you don't have time to feel anything. You know, I'm concentrating on, when they drop those bombs, I got to drop my bombs. If I don't drop my bombs at the right time, you know, I'm dropping it on a village, or, you know. So I am concentrating on just my job. And that's what everybody's doing. They're concentrating on their job. And so just as I said, the bombs came out, I flicked the switch, and the bombs had no sooner left, and it's when we were hit, we launched. And I might add that this is a little premature maybe, but after we crashed in Sweden, we found out that there was a live shell stuck in our gas tank that had not exploded. And I think, what's the movie where they were making shells? What's that movie they were making shells and not filling them up? I think we got one of them. But anyway, that's immaterial. So we just were falling behind the formation, and we headed, the crew leader, or the pilot leader in the group, recommended we go towards Sweden and try to at least get into Denmark, which was occupied. You got a better chance of escape if you land in Denmark. And so we headed for Denmark. And for the next 2 hours, we were flying across Germany alone. And although there was a fighter plane that a P-51 pilot came on and said, we'll go with you guys as far as we can, and he was with us for maybe an hour, and then he called and said, sorry guys, I'm running out of gas, I gotta head away, good luck, you know, good luck. So we just continued on, and till we got to the water, and we thought, well, somewhere here, Sweden is across the water, and when we got there, at least once, as we were flying across Germany, every little town had an anti-aircraft gun, and they were shooting at us the whole time. So I would say, anti-aircraft fire on the right, and then he'd go left, and then we go. So we were kind of just avoiding the towns as we were traveling across Germany. And then at that time we threw out. We had a light in the airplane to keep it in the air because we were continually losing altitude during this whole trip. and because we only had 2 engines, and we were losing gasoline, and our engineer was standing knee deep or ankle deep in gasoline, and he was stuffing everything he had into the fuel lines to block the gasoline. He was covered with gasoline. The plane was covered with gasoline, and so we knew we couldn't shoot our guns even if there was you couldn't cause a spark. So we threw out everything. We threw out our guns. We threw out everything in the plane that was loose. We threw it out to keep the plane in the air. And then we got a little farther down the line. Somebody called in and said, there's 2 German fighters down to the left, to the right. And they were probably 10,000 feet under us, but apparently they never saw us. So, that was the worst part of the mission, when you were flying and not knowing, what the next minute was going to bring. But anyway, we got to Sweden. We didn't know we were in Sweden. There were no maps in the airplane of that area beyond Germany, so they were.
You weren't
guessing.
supposed to go to Sweden.
Yeah, but they were afraid of people they were going to fly to Sweden without a problem, So anyway, we got over the Swedish coast, and the pilot said the gas tanks show empty, and we're going to crash land in the nearest field. And so he picked out the field, and as you know, we can't have a turret we can't have a parachute in our turrets. So I took my parachute. We carried a pack, and I took he said, you go into your ditching position. My ditching position on the airplane was in the waist of the plane. So I had to carry my chute. I had to take my chute, and I stopped and I talked to the pilot, and I said, how's it going? He said, well, I think we'll be okay. We're going to land. And then he said, get back to the waist. So I went back to the waist and left my parachute behind his chair. And so I went back and we ditched, and a few minutes later, all the engines quit. He was down to maybe 3,000 feet, and he had picked out the field, and all the engines quit, and all the guys started bailing out, and I didn't have a parachute. So I had a race from the back of the plane to the front of the plane through the open bomb bay, because the radio operator and the engineer were bailing out there. So I ran through there. I don't think I touched anything. I went right through the middle of that. And as the pilot was bailing out, was coming down to bail out, and he told me to go, and I said, no, shoot. And he remembered, this man saved my life. He remembered that the radio operator had a spare chute. He reached back, grabbed this parachute pack, snapped it on me,